Welcome to Squatch Zone Radio. All right, everybody, welcome to Squatch Zone Radio. I'm your host, Daniel Benoit. I want to introduce you to Larry Battson, Larry the Animal Guy, all the way from the state of Indiana. And we have Larry Battson live with us right now. Larry, I was having trouble with my audio. Do you hear me right now?
Yeah, I hear you perfectly. Thank you.
Oh, great. That is awesome because it let me reconnect. I don't know what. Blog Talk Radio has been giving me a lot of trouble lately. And so I can hang up from my phone because I have my phone on and I'm listening through my computer now at the same time. So.
Well, we had Larry Battson's Wild World. We produced over 160 shows on Blog Talk Radio. And every one was
nice.
An adventure. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I've actually been actually introduced to another radio platform, which I'm actually seriously considering, and it's a much larger platform, and it reaches a lot of people. So I mean, there's just so much to deal with right now. But Blog Talk's been good to me, but lately it's been acting up. I don't know what the issue is. So
well, I have to. God bless Blog Talk Radio because like I said, we did a lot of shows, and I think over all the shows that we did, we had close to 80,000 downloads. So it does fine. I mean, but it is an adventure.
Wow, yeah, that's awesome though. That's awesome. I mean,
well, what I got on to having on my show is classic rock stars.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
I had on, to name a few, I had Al Jardine on from the Beach Boys, Dave Davies from the Kinks. That's going to really age me. Bobby Caldwell from Captain Beyond, and the list, Gary Lewis from Gary Lewis and the Playboys, Jerry Lewis's boy. We had quite a few rock stars on. It was cool, and they were. I'll tell you what, to tell you the truth, they were very easy to talk into coming on the show. So it was very cool. And they're as you know, they're still available for download. So anyone wants to listen.
Okay, and you're. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Plus, we had the legendary interview and it's the only time it's ever happened. We had on John Green and Bob Gimlin on the same show.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. There was actually people that transcribed that show and posted it on the internet. So, yeah, that was very cool.
Yeah. I know that's one of the things that I do want to get to tonight. I do want to talk about the Roger Patterson footage eventually. That's one of your presentations I've gotten to watch off of Bill Coda Productions, Bill Lancaster's YouTube channel. I watched your presentation at the Sasquatch Watch of Virginia's Virginia Bigfoot Conference, and
right.
That was awesome, and
thank you.
I loved your presentation. Yeah, and you're awesome with the crowd. I got to give you that. You're real good with the crowd, so you're definitely a people's person.
Oh. I've had a lot of practice. I've been doing wildlife lectures in schools and in front of a lot of different audiences for 40 years. So I've had a lot of practice. In fact, we did a lot of work with Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, Jim Fowler, and that gave us the opportunity to take animals on shows like Johnny Carson, Today's Show, Oprah Winfrey, Merv Griffin, Mike Douglas, which really ages me. So I've had a lot of practice. So,
well, let me ask you: you being involved with wildlife research, what got you involved with that?
With wildlife?
Yeah.
In general? Well, as a child, I was always interested in animals. But I think what really took me over the edge was I was very fortunate as a child because every summer our parents would go to Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado, Estes Park, and we'd go to those ranger talks. And I think this is what really inspired me to do lectures that I've been doing, like I mentioned earlier, for 40 years. We attended one where there was a ranger there who had been hiking in a very remote area of Rocky Mountain National Park called the Never Summer Range. And he took thousands of slides, and he did a presentation for a full house. And you could hear a pin drop during that whole lecture that he gave. And what was really cool about the whole deal was there was 2 mountain lion cubs, or 2 or 3 mountain lion cubs that were on the roof of this visitor center, and you could hear them running across the top of the roof during the lecture. So that was it was beyond cool. And I truly believe that's what inspired me to do what I do now.
Now you're also involved with Bigfoot. Now I'm going to be honest, I don't know how involved you are, but I know you have a lot of knowledge about Bigfoot. Now, where did Bigfoot come into play here?
Well, I've been involved with the Sasquatch and Bigfoot legend for close to 50 years. And I'd always been interested in it, always did a lot of research about it, read lots of books. In fact, I can still remember buying Peter Burns' book when it first came out. I saw him do an interview on Mike Douglas. That had to be, 76, 75, something like that. And I read that book cover to cover, and I always had a fascination with it. Well, when I started doing the wildlife thing and working, like I said, with Wild Kingdom, Jim Fowler, who did not have any animals, would ask us to come different parts of the country to do lectures with him and bring our animals. And one of those lectures occurred in Callaway Gardens in Columbus, Georgia. And we were having breakfast, and he had just gotten back from Russia. And they were doing a documentary for a show called Spirit of Adventure on the Russian brown bears. And when he got over there, he said over breakfast, he said all the guides wanted to talk about, the Russian guides, was Bigfoot, because they had seen something in those mountains that was very similar to what's been reported in, of course, in Northern California, Washington, Oregon, throughout Canada, Alaska. So I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. And it got me inspired about it again. So it wasn't shortly after that. I'd been doing a show in Cleveland called the American Canadian Sport, Travel, and Outdoor Show. I was their MC for their big stage show and did wildlife lectures and so forth there. And they asked me one year, they said, we'd really like to do something different this year. Do you have any ideas? And I said, yeah, I do. I said, why don't we do a display on Bigfoot, Sasquatch? I said, I'll put it all together. And they said, that sounds like a fantastic idea. And they had a pretty good budget. So I'm putting this, in fact, I even built an 8-foot Sasquatch out of dock foam, carved out of dock foam and paper mache. And so they had a budget. So I started wanting more. I wanted stuff for this display. So I called Willow Creek, California, to Hodgson's Variety Store, which I was aware of, and talked to Al Hodgson, and I told him, I said, what I had in mind, and asked if he had any Bigfoot souvenirs, like cups, maps, whatever. And he did, and he said, I'd be more than happy to send them to me. He also gave me the number for the Chamber of Commerce for Willow Creek. He said, I'm sure they'd send you all the brochures you want, because this is a big show. And so I asked him, I said, do you know anyone that's ever, seen a Bigfoot? And he said, well, who you need to talk to was a couple guys that were here not long ago. And he said, if you hang on, I'll give you their numbers. Well, those 2 guys that he was talking about was John Green and Bob Titmus.
Yes,
so I called
that's
John
right.
Green up. Yeah, I called him up. And in our conversation, I persuaded him to come to Cleveland, Ohio for that show. And he came over for 3 days and lectured. We really lectured together. And what a nice guy he was, It was an inspiration. Well, he said who I need to talk to was Bob Titmus. So I called him up, and he wasn't very forthcoming at first. It was the latter part of his life. He was very ill. He wasn't doing very well. And I talked to Bob, and he finally just opened up to me. He started talking. And I asked him, I said, have you ever seen a Bigfoot? And he said, yeah. He said, I have. I said, I've seen them twice. I said, well, tell me more about it. He said, well, off the coast of Alaska in 1941 when I was in the Navy, he said it was almost dark, and he said, I walked up on deck. All the rest of the sailors were down in the ship playing cards, eating whatever. And he observed a bipedal animal walking along the edge of the beach, or the shore, I should say. And he watched it walk up into the bush. He didn't tell anybody about it. But he had decided after that point that when he got out of the Navy, he was going to go in pursuit of this thing. And in his own words, he said, I have killed, and he was a taxidermist, and mounted just every animal native to that part of the world except one of those. And his second time that he had seen them in his research was in 1963 up in Kitimat, British Columbia. He basically watched 3 of them climb a rock wall that would have taken an experienced rock climber all day to do. They did it in a matter of about 30 minutes. And I have to say, Daniel, that after I hung up the phone with him, it all changed, because I was going to take this exhibit, I was going to have some fun with it, because I wasn't certain that these things existed. But after my conversation with Bob, I was pretty well convinced that we had something here.
Wow. Yeah.
And Bob Titmus was you were mentioning the Patterson film. He's the one that steered Roger in that direction of Bluff Creek, California. And luckily, Roger had a friend in Bob Gimlin that was willing to take off work and basically provided the horses and the transportation for them to get down there and do that.
Now, a majority of us, I was going to mention real quick, I know a majority of us are familiar with just the basic, the footage and just the brief story that was told there. Now, you had learned of some information that I don't think I've heard before till I heard the discussion of what you had brought up in your presentation at the Sasquatch Watch conference about something that you guys found over there.
Well, Bob Titmus, he had been in that area earlier, and for the folks that aren't familiar with that part of the country, that's rainforest. And as he put it, if you get back in there and it gets dark, he says, you don't leave, because you can wander around there and be lost for the rest of your life. They'll never find you. They've lost airplanes in that territory, never found them. So that's what happened. He got so involved in looking for hair samples and footprints and all that he realized, hey, it gets almost dark. And well, it would get cold there at night. So what he basically had to do was dig a pit in the ground for him to lay in at night and cover himself up with leaves and branches to protect him against the weather. But the only thing exposed was his face, and that's where he slept. Well, about, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, he could hear something coming through the forest, and at first he thought it was elk. And he thought, if it's elk, their hooves are like razor blades. He says, they'll kill me. They'll stomp me to death, not even realizing it. But then he soon decided that, no, it was two-legged. And all of a sudden it stopped, and he could hear it like it was smelling the air. And in his words, he says, it could smell me, but it couldn't decide where I was. So then it basically just started screaming and tore the woods apart, walked through the woods all night long, back and forth, breaking tree limbs, throwing rocks. And the next morning when he got up, he said, Larry, it just looked like a bulldozer had been through those woods. But he found footprints. Well, after the Gimlin Patterson film had been shot, he went down to Bluff Creek, and he first didn't find those prints because Bob had gone the night of the filming. It started to rain. He said those prints needed to be covered up to protect them because there was going to be tracking dogs coming in the next day. And so Bob, he had trouble finding those prints, but when he finally figured out what they'd done, covered them with tree bark, he got onto it, and he looked at these prints. And he realized it was the same print that he had seen 2 or 3 years earlier in that when he was laying in that pit all night, and that thing was screaming at him back and forth and running through the woods all night. So that was pretty sobering when he thought it was the same animal. And Bob Gimlin had told me that they had seen 3 different sets of prints in that area, him and Roger had. So there's basically 3 different animals that they had seen. And, when you look at that film, why doesn't that thing, it just stays in the open. Why didn't it just make a left and go up into the trees and be gone? It didn't have to stay open for that long. Well, what it was, and Native Americans have told me this, it's the old broken wing trick that it wanted to see what those guys were going to do if they were going to follow him, because there was 2 other Sasquatches in that area, which probably were just in the tree line, and Bob and Roger just didn't see them. And this thing was trying to divert the attention so it would follow them. And Bob did for a short distance, after Roger had found his horse, Bob tracked it but realized that was fruitless because of the terrain and so forth. So when Bob Titmus got there and found the footprints, he tracked it. And he tracked it up to the side of this hill, and at the top of this hill there was these rocks about the size of golf balls covered with green moss. And he said you could see where this thing had set its heels down and set its buttocks into the ground. And basically he told me, and he said from that vantage point, it had a complete view of the valley to see exactly what those guys were going to do. So while they were casting those footprints, this thing was watching them.
Now, I've heard what you shared earlier, how it was possibly directing its attention away from others that may have been in the area. I've actually heard that from several other people in their, in their thoughts or theories, that could have been the possibility, which, if you think about it, it makes sense.
Well, they probably heard it from me originally because I was the first one, I think, to disclose that information. In fact, a lot of these stories I got out of Bob Titmus, he had never, even John Green hadn't heard before.
Yeah, that's like like when I was in elementary school, we would get in a circle, and then one person would start off a rumor or whatever, and then by the time it gets around, well, that's a different scenario. I'm sorry, but it's like it's like a chain reaction. But then again, along the lines, people do change some stories and stuff, But the best stories always come from the originals that were there, so that's good. So there's some other theories where people believe that there was little ones. Like you mentioned, because they did find other tracks here, like you mentioned. Now, some people want to believe or claim that there was a really young one, like we're talking possible infant, juvenile, that was involved. Now, people play around with that footage all the time and do what they can with their own computers. But I know there's Bill Munn's a graphic analyzer is pretty much tore that thing apart, So, but
there's only so much you can see with that film because of the quality of equipment that was used then. That's the same camera my dad filmed our vacations on. And when you look at the bouncy part, we had entire vacations that looked like that. So, you can only take so much out of that old film, and computers have done a lot with it. They've stabilized it and so forth. But then there was that silly story that there'd been a massacre there.
I've heard that too. Yes, I heard that.
Yeah,
and some people, I'm on the fence about that. I don't see nothing that supports that, to be honest with you. I really don't. But there's some people that run.
Let me explain something that, and I'm sure anybody that spent any time with doing any type of, when you go into the forest with these things, you're a moron. Let's face it, we're pretty damn pitiful. Take off our clothes and walk into the forest and survive on your own. It ain't gonna happen. So, these things are geniuses when it comes to survival, and we're not. And that's just, I always laugh at these guys who go Bigfoot researching, and they wear camouflage. And I said, who are you from? I told them, I said, these things are smart enough that they realize they associate camouflage with hunters. Hunters they associate with guns. And then, they've dodged bullets before, or actually been hit by bullets, I'm sure. So I tell people, I said, if you want to go do research on Sasquatch, I says, don't go at night, because one of the best films has been made, the Patterson-Gimlin film, daytime, the Freeman film, daytime, the Russian, I don't think it was Russian, the Canadian film where it was up along the ridge, daytime.
Yeah.
I says, at night, there ain't no chance in hell. I said, at night, the coloration of these things, they're invisible. They could walk up within 2 foot of you, and you wouldn't know it unless you smelled them or heard them. So I said, get you a nice, bright Hawaiian shirt. Don't even think about Bigfoot. And go out in the supposed areas, and your chances of observing one or seeing one's much better.
Well, with what you just said, it makes me feel like the encounter I had back in 2014, that almost adds more credibility to what I saw. And the thing is, I wasn't alone. There were 6 of us. And if you don't mind, I'd like to briefly run that by you real
Sure,
quick.
go. Yeah.
It was actually during a 2014 camping expedition. It was our Bigfoot camping expedition. And like I said, there was a group of us, 6 of us all together. And from where our base camp was, we had traveled on foot up the forest road down to the lake that was in the area. We were there just before it got dark. We were paired up in 2s, spread out around the lake. We were listening to our parabolic microphones. We gave off some vocalizations. We've actually got, we gave off one particular vocalization, and we actually got a response from it, which was pretty cool. Well, after hanging around there and just listening and everything, we regrouped, and then we started back on foot. We had about a mile hike back to camp. And, of course, by this time, it is way late. We didn't realize the time till, we actually looked. And here we are. We're walking back up the forest road. We still had a good ways to go. And as we're walking up the forest road, we saw a deer on the one side, because we got headlamps on. Our headlamps, we're looking around. We're just browsing as we're walking. And we're talking at normal tone. We weren't trying to be quiet, We were just on our way. We wanted to get back to camp,
All right.
So here we are. We're walking, and I'm actually up in front of everybody. We're kind of like in a stretched out, scattered line, and then something, after seeing the deer on the right, something caught my attention up on the left. And the first thing I saw, it was sitting kind of low, and I'm staring at it. What the heck is that? Now, what I was seeing was bright yellow glow reflection from off my headlamp. And one of the first things that ran through my mind before I seen it blink and I got more focused, there was a set of eyes. Well, we have, in the national forest, we have these little yellow plaques. They usually say, no travel, whatever. And so I'm thinking I'm seeing some kind of yellow reflector that's on a tree. But then I start to walk up a little closer. Then all of a sudden I see a set of eyes blink at me. And that's when I signaled back to the next guy behind me, Tracy Arnold. I said, Tracy, we got eye shine up here. And he spotted it, and he told the rest of the guys, get up here. We got eye shine. So we all get up to this area because whatever was there apparently disappeared. But when we get up there, we were looking into the area. And sure enough, whatever was up just off the edge of the forest road, we got a glimpse of it again. And the first thing we noticed, bright yellow eye shine, and we did not see the body, but we seen the eyes so clear. They were bright yellow, ambush-looking eyes. And this subject, this figure that was kind of short, was swaying back, side to side. And, I was like, oh, what the heck? And, then that's when we took notice there was another one next to it, about 5-6 feet away. Now, this one here was much taller than this little one. This one here we estimated at that time about 6 foot tall. Because one thing is, when I tell people this story, I was like, at that time we didn't realize the edge of the road sloped down to where this subject was. So we're noticing there's 2 of them now. Now we got one, we're saying 4 to 5 feet tall. The other one was a good 6 foot tall, and it was just staring there. It was just the same color eyes, bright yellow, and they were blinking. And it blinked maybe once or twice. And for a good little moment there, we were staring at just these 2. And there's an excitement starting to grow. Like, what are we looking at? And then it didn't dawn on us till after we saw another subject behind just to the right of the one subject that was around 6 foot tall. We noticed something else behind the bushes, and you could see the eyes reflecting from off of a light. Again, same color. And what appeared to be, it may have been crouched down. And then this subject, as it got taller, it was well over 7 to 8 foot tall. And you could see the eye level difference. Now, at this time, this is after midnight. This was approximately around 12:30 in the morning. And we're observing 3 sets of yellow eye shine. And this is what kind of got me, I think this is what got a couple of us more excited, because I think there's only 2 of us that actually saw this next part. I think Tracy was the one to observe this. I can't remember if the others did or not, but me and Tracy both saw this. But we saw of the tallest subject, we seen the head turn to the side, And then apparently it took a step or two, and then it looked back at us. At that moment, you could see a slight silhouette of the roundness of a head, And then the thing is, here it is. It's pitch area, and we got our headlamps. We all have headlamps. You think there'd be enough light in there to see something, but it's like the power of the darkness and blending in with whatever color their hair or fur is. But that's the most we actually seen is the eye shine and the silhouette of the tallest one. The other ones, I didn't make no sense why we didn't see more of them. Because that little one had, kind of had the bobbing, swaying side to side motion. And the thing is, when I see that, it kind of makes me think of a primate, But I don't know. It's the way
before.
It was. Yeah, it was weird. A lot of times people claim to see them by trees or just standing there swaying side to side. Well, that's what the small one was doing. So, like you mentioned, they could be in total darkness right in front of you. You won't see them. And I think
if you hadn't seen those lights, you wouldn't have ever seen them.
Absolutely. So that was mysterious. Until this day, well, we went back to camp. And after we got back to camp, me and Tracy started thinking about something. I said, we were kicking ourselves in the butt because we both had backpacks on. And the thing is, in our backpacks, we had night vision binoculars in our backpack. But not once did we ever think about pulling them out to get a better view. And so, but we were trying to debunk the whole situation. Could it have been this? Could have been this? Because I've had a lot of encounters with black bears. I know I got mountain lions out there. I found their tracks, and I'm thinking of every other possibility. What animal could this be? Well, I don't know. It was kind of, I don't know. It was exciting trying to debunk it. We even went back the next day to do a height comparison, and our estimates were pretty close to being accurate, because the tallest subject was definitely around the 8-foot mark, and then of course we had about 6 foot, and then the small one. So we like to believe that what we saw was a family unit, So, but I don't know. That to us was very exciting.
Well,
I'm sorry for rambling on.
No, absolutely not. If they're primates, if you see one, there's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 you didn't see. That's just the fact of the whole deal.
Okay.
There's no primate species in the world that travels solo.
Right.
They're always family groups for safety reasons. And so, the ending of Harry and the Hendersons is probably the most sobering thing you'll ever see when you watch Harry walking in the forest and all of a sudden there's several of them just appear up behind trees. That's very true.
Yeah, that part. Exactly. A lot of us. I'm sure others will agree. I guess is it safe to say that's natural camouflage, right?
Oh, they're almost invisible, even in the daytime. Unless they get out in the open, you never see them. It's basically the same coloration as a bear. And you talk to people, bear hunters. If they didn't use dogs or baits, they'd never kill one.
Right.
They're elusive. Your black bear is about as intelligent as your great apes. They just don't have the facial expressions or the facial expressions primarily. But so you go walking through the forest wanting to see a bear, it ain't gonna happen. Not unless you're if you're up in a tree stand, I suppose.
Yeah.
During deer season, there's a couple pretty funny videos.
And that's one thing I tell people because I know it's weird. Everybody has their own way of having. Everybody has their own thoughts and theories, or based off of their research in the field, how they observe things. And I don't know. I guess in a way, I like to say I feel like I'm. What's the right word I'm trying to use? I can't think of it, but fortunate. Because I've gotten to observe a lot of different wildlife just in the one particular area I'm in, and I'm in the George Washington National Forest all the time, and I've had several encounters with black bears. Some of them close, some of them further away. Because usually by the time I'm seeing them, they're already going the other way because they've already smelt you or whatever. And
sure.
But You know, so it's
I
always
have two
exciting
black
seeing
bears.
wildlife.
Oh, it is.
What's that?
I have two black bears, and I know a lot about bear behavior. So they're sharp, and as I said, not unless in Yellowstone National Park, of course, now all those bears have been moved out. If people didn't feed them out of the cars, they would never see them because they're so secretive and intelligent and so forth. And these Sasquatches, that's a whole different deal. I mean, you just multiply that times 10. So anybody, you got a better chance. I don't know how to compare it. You got a better chance of getting struck by lightning on a Tuesday at 4:00 in the afternoon than walking in the forest and seeing a Sasquatch.
Yeah, and real quick about the bears. You mentioned talking about bears and how elusive they normally are, and I know a lot of people heard me. They've heard me numerous times. I have a comparison I do in a few different ways when it comes to Sasquatch and bears. But do you believe bears have a similar pattern to a Sasquatch as far as
what do you mean?
Their behavior or their patterns? What's that?
Well, I don't know. They're both unpredictable. That's the only reason there isn't more film and picture. Well, good pictures. I know there's a bunch of blob pictures, but their behavior is totally unpredictable. That's the thing about it. And bears are kind of too, because they show no expression. A lot of bear handlers have been hurt or killed because bears are tough to figure out sometimes. But I've been around them enough. I've raised these two bears for close to 20 years and work with them and been around them daily that I know bear behavior pretty well. In fact, I'd even feel comfortable.
That's pretty good.
I'd feel comfortable in the field with wild black bears as far as knowing what's up and knowing what they're going to do. Because basically your black bear is just a big chicken. I mean, you scream and yell and wave your arms, it's out of there. Not unless there's cubs
they
involved.
run away.
Yeah, they're big chickens. They're not stupid.
Well, Larry, we have Ryan Reedon on the line. He's one of our co-hosts. He wanted to jump in there. I was going to let him jump in there real quick. Go ahead, Ryan.
Thanks, Dan. How you doing, Larry? I just heard you say you were doing this for about 50 years. Were there any areas that you frequented more often for your research purposes, or getting out there to look for them?
I live in research. I live in Bigfoot country, so I'd be taking my trash out one night and walk into one. And my theory is, and my wife says the same thing, is that if you're looking for it, you're not going to find it.
Exactly. It seems to happen when you least expect it.
Like honey mushrooms.
Have you had any? Have you had any encounters yourself, visual?
Not that great, not what I would consider spectacular ones. We've had them around the property before. They've had my tigers all worked up one night. They thought tigers. Well, the history of that event was I had friends that were we were putting up the new bear enclosure, and I'd gone off to buy raw meat tiger food for that day. And I get back, and I had a couple of friends from Florida that were helping me, gator hunters. And they said, hey, there was something walking down your valley while you was gone. It was big. Couldn't see it, but it was big. So I didn't think anything about it. So that that same night, I'm feeding the cats. And at that time, I had one Siberian tiger named Louis. He was huge. He was about a 600-pounder. And basically, when you fed him, it was like he had to make a kill. He'd get all upset, growl, spit at you and the whole bit. Where I'm taking a bucket of meat out to him and basically just pour it in his house and have at it. You don't have to make a kill, brother. It's easy. Well, that particular night, after they heard that day, I walked up to his enclosure with that bucket of meat, and he wasn't coming up to the door like he normally did. So I thought, what's happened? And I looked down it was dark. I looked down his enclosure, and he was clear at the other end, like one of those concrete statues you see of lions or tigers that people have by their driveway. And he was looking straight back in the woods, straight back in that valley. And I looked down at the other cats, and they were all doing the same thing. So I was probably within, 20, 30 yards of one. And I didn't think much about it until I thought about it later. That if I'd walked back in that woods, I'd probably run right into one. So, but
that's interesting. Being on your own property.
Oh yeah, well, my wife's had sightings here before, and she'd kill me if I tell anybody. She's the same. She's the same thing. Leave them alone. I was doing a lecture in Southern Indiana, and finished the lecture, and this little old lady walks up. She says, "I know what you're talking about. I've seen them." She says, "People should leave them alone." And she just patted me on my hand. I says, "Ma'am, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. You should just leave them alone." Because, it's basically, when I talked to Yellowstone Park Ranger Bob Jackson, and he'd had a sighting, and Bob Jackson was the best park ranger Yellowstone's ever had. He arrested more people for poaching in his 30 years than all the rangers combined. And he observed a Sasquatch stalking a deer in Yellowstone National Park. And his testimonies put people in prison, cost him tens of thousands of dollars, cost him equipment. And if he says he watched a Sasquatch stalk a deer and he doesn't care if anybody believes him or not, I tend to call that a pretty valuable witness. So pretty much after my conversation with him, I realized that all the feelings I had about this were right, and that they do exist. They're very rare, very unpredictable, very highly intelligent, very strong, and and I think a lot of people, if they run into one face to face, their feeling about pursuing them or camping out to find them would change drastically. Because I'm not saying they're not violent creatures either, because I've had reports out of Indian reservations up in Washington and Canada, where people have been killed by them. So, I'm not saying they're peaceful. People disappear in the forest all the time, never found.
Right.
I'm not saying it's because of that, by no means. But one of the stories or reports that I'd gotten was out of a reservation up just south of the Canadian border in Washington, where three young Native Americans were running their salmon traps, lines, and they didn't come back. Well, when they sent a party out to look for them, they found them. One had been basically buried underneath a pile of rocks. One had been completely dismembered. And the third body that was found, what had basically happened to him is something had grabbed him by the ankles and beat him up against a tree, because there was brain tissue on all the trees around that area where they found the body. And there's several incidences I've heard of people finding coyotes that have been grabbed by their feet and beaten up against trees. That's been reported before. Of course, it kind of falls in line with taking a piece of wood and beating it up against a tree to track them or to get a response. So, I think a lot of people don't realize what they're messing with here. And basically, the one Native American, she told me, she said, I was one specific area that I've done a lot of reports with. And sometimes I kind of regret, because them guys from, what's that stupid show, Not Finding Bigfoot, they'd gone into this area and did a pretty silly show down in southern Indiana, Morgan Monroe State Forest. And this Native American gal 25 years ago told me that there was 5 of them living in that forest, and she could call them in. But she said, if you get between a male and a female or a male and a baby, he'll kill you. I said, well, how does he do that? She said, he grabs you by your ankles and beats you up against a tree.
Oh, wow.
So,
I believe it. So they're strong.
that's pretty, you know. So I've heard that more than once. I've heard that story. So you know, I take some faith in that. I think, you know, I take a lot of. Basically what I do is when I get a report, or you know, and I'm not interested at all in the report of one walking across in front of my car and gone. That's not interesting at all. Because, you know, what are you going to do? Go back to that area? The thing's 50 miles from there by now. I'm interested in the reports that a little bit more substantial, something more of interest has happened, something more has been observed. I still say there's somebody out there who's got a film that's better than the Patterson film by a long shot, but they're not going to release it. They're not going to show it because that film has been made at their vacation spot or their place they've worked their life to buy, their retirement place, realizing that if they would release that film, that every guy in camouflage and night vision would show up at their house, and it would be a dang circus. So they don't. So I know for a fact that there's somebody out there who's got a really, really, really good film, and I have in my collection a picture from the 1940s of a fellow in Northern California that took this picture, and he always used to tell his family, he says he had an apple orchard. He says, "Oh, the people of the forest come out and eat my apples." Well, they're thinking Grandpa's just goofy. His Alzheimer's has already set in. Well, so when he passed, and they go through all the stuff, you know, they're picking his bones basically after he dies and going through his valuables and all that. Well, they found a box full of pictures, and sure enough, one of those pictures is of this thing, hair covered, round head, huge shoulders, and they could see it had been taken right there in his orchard. So that was in 1940, 1941. And when they laughed at him, he just shut up about it. And you know, Daniel Boone in his journals has said that he killed a Sasquatch in Kentucky and buried it.
Yeah, that's right.
When he told people about it, they laughed at him, so he just shut up about it. Didn't say any more about it until you know, he'd written the story in his journal. George Schaller, who's probably one of the foremost zoologists in the world, he did more research on the snow leopard, has a Bigfoot cast on his wall, and in his office in Chicago. And when you ask him about it, his answer always is, there is no proof, there's no evidence that they do not exist. None.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a good point.
Yeah.
I've been in that argument with skeptics and non-believers with a simple question. Could you prove to me that they don't exist? You know,
well,
of course they have all these questions.
Yeah, anybody that's a skeptic say, no, there is no way. Well, they've done no research on it.
Right.
You know, they haven't walked in my shoes. They haven't talked to all the people I've talked to that have seen them, and you know, I know I can tell a liar in a minute because I'm a pretty damn good one myself. And but I haven't lied in the last 44 minutes though. But
thank you.
The truth of the matter is anybody that spent any time on this. Because I was skeptical before I called John Green. I was skeptical before I talked to Bob Titmus. But when John Green flew to Cleveland, Ohio, and he walked into that Holiday Inn at the restaurant lounge in his big Canadian sweater with his wife, and we sat down and talked in kind of a dimly lit room, I tell you what, it was probably one of the most phenomenal experiences I've ever had. And in fact, he was a very generous man. He gave me cassette tapes of Roger Patterson interviews and all this stuff he'd done. He just flat gave me tapes. He says, "Here, go on." And one of the I have two regrets that he had given me permission to make an audio book of Sasquatch legend, or the Sasquatch apes among us. He'd given me permission to do that, make an audio book of it, and I never did it. The second thing that I'd gotten permission, there's three things. Second permission is Bob Titmus said, if you come up to Harrison Hot Springs, British Columbia, you can make copies of all these casts that I have, which included the Patterson film cast. and I never got there to do it. And John Green had asked me, because he thought I would be the most credible person to do it, is to come out, go to British Columbia, and pick up a copy of the Skookum cast and take it to guys like George Schaller and various zoologists all over the country. He was going to pay me to do that one summer. And because of my responsibilities here, I just couldn't do it. Plus, I didn't want to tell him what that might cost him. I would be embarrassed. But in fact, Rick, can't think of his last name off the top. No. He'd also given me permission to take the copy of the cast and share it with zoologists in different part of the country that wouldn't have a chance to see that cast, not unless they went to Washington. Or I think they had it at Harrison Hot Springs, I think. I don't recall. So those are 3 regrets I wish I'd never done. And, when I spoke to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on the Bigfoot, I spoke at the National Conservation Training Center. This is in 2009, I believe, to a group of about 250 scientists and zoologists and naturalists. John said to me, he said, Larry, he said, next to the Patterson film, that is one of the most important things that's ever happened to this Bigfoot legend. For you to get the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to actually pay you to come and do a lecture on the subject, to sponsor it, he says it was unbelievable. And that made me feel pretty humble. I mean, I thought, my God. So, and now, of course, they're gone, so the chances of doing those things is out the window. In fact, I had a production company here in Indiana. I had them sold. In fact, I had it entirely all put together that John Green, myself, and Bob Gimlin were going to ride on horseback to the film site at Bluff Creek and shoot a film of sitting around a campfire that night and talking about that day in 1967. But the production people here in Indiana said, well, they saw Legend Meets Science, Jeff Mildrum's show with the Discovery Channel. They said, there's $500,000 worth of effects in that film. We can't do anything like that. I says, I'm not asking you to. I said, this is going to be very honest. This is going to be very truthful. This would have been something that would have been in every Bigfoot person's library of John Green and Bob Gimlin talking about the Patterson film around a campfire there at the film site. No effects. Nothing. Just raw footage of us talking about that day. And when they pulled out of that project, I was sick. I thought, my God. I said, that was going to be so cool. I had Bob Gimlin ready to come down from Yakima, Washington in his trailer with 3 horses. We were going to go and film it, but it didn't happen.
It's never too late.
Well, John Green's gone, and Bob Gimlin's not in good health now, so it is too late. So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so that can't happen. I still am I encourage people to listen to, it's on the internet, the blog talk program I did with Bob Gimlin and John Green, because it's a hell of a good program. I have to say myself, I wouldn't respond. I just managed to arrange it and put it all together, but as far as the actual program, it's Bob and John. They were phenomenal.
Yeah, I've always wanted to meet Bob. I mean, I know he's at a lot of conventions. I know he attends the Ohio Bigfoot Conference a lot, and I went there for the first time this past year, and I really was impressed. It was really nice. Got to meet a lot of great people, Jeff Meldrum and Cliff Barackman, Bobo, and several others, and a lot of people you've always known just through social media, and you finally get to meet them in person, and and sometimes we share stories and swap information, and just have a good old fellowship time.
Well, Mark DeWurst done one heck of a job with that. I did it in the early days before it kicked off when Don Keating was doing it, and Mark was, of course, helping as well. But I was doing it before it really kicked off, and Mark has done a phenomenal job with it. Has promoted it well, and he's a P.T. Barnum as far as I'm concerned in Bigfoot lore.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm on to Hocking Hill. Was it Hocking Hills in Ohio?
Yeah, the
I'm
Hocking
going to do
Hills.
that conference. Yeah, I'm going to do that, and next September, I think, is the time. I'm not quite sure, but I've already told them I would do that. So go over there.
I was
day or two.
I definitely want to talk to you off air, about future. Would you ever come back to Virginia?
Oh yeah, well I've got a couple nieces in Virginia that back when we went there and did the conference with Billy Willard, they came over and I'd never met them before.
Oh
so,
yeah, that's right. I remember that.
It wouldn't
I
take
saw
me
the
too
pictures.
much. It wouldn't take me too much to get back. I love Virginia. I think, as far as I'm concerned, that's probably Bigfoot Central.
Oh my goodness!
When you got that much wild area that's nobody's been, that tells me the population of those things is probably greater than anywhere.
Well, I can tell you, I've just me alone, as far as reports I've gathered, when I started putting more information out publicly, I mean, you'll be surprised the people that came out of the woodwork that was willing to talk.
Well,
I've
always said that 99% of the reports don't get reported, or the sightings never get reported.
Yeah.
Because most people don't want to. People think they're an idiot. They don't. They refuse to believe what they've seen.
And I'll tell you, these people here.
Share.
Yeah, these are people that weren't believers, so they couldn't believe what they saw. Standing on the side of the road or crossing the road.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's happened. I mean, you get law enforcement people that have seen these things. Of course, they just shut up about it.
Oh, yeah.
I had a sighting within, it's within a half mile of here the conservation officer told me about. And he found 16-inch footprints after the sighting, and he said, I can't say anything about this. He said, I'll show you the area. He said, I'll tell you what happened. I investigated it, and it was a pretty wild one. It was guys hunting squirrels, and one of the young men came upon one. Basically, they charged him, and then that moment of charging, this kid sunk to his knees, even though he had a shotgun in his lap, and had total fear. And this thing took off through the woods, screaming like a baboon. And his friend saw it too, and his friend saw it. He just picked up his gun and ran home about 3 miles. In fact, they couldn't find him right away, and they thought, what's happened to him? And he was at home. And they kept them apart. The conservation officer that got called and investigated it, he kept them apart and had them both draw pictures of what they'd seen. And they drew the same thing. They weren't artists by any stretch of the imagination, but they drew the same thing. And that family moved out of that area. I can get there in 2 minutes from my house. This force that this happened in. So.
That's awesome. Are you familiar?
I've been up at 4 in the morning outside and heard sounds I couldn't explain what they were.
Oh yeah.
Out my back door.
Yeah, I've heard various different sounds, screams. I've heard different howls. I've heard whoops, and but a lot of the howls. I get a lot of coyotes in the area that like to sound off at night. Barred owls are very famous in my area. They're very common.
I have several of my back. Well, Bob Jackson, the Yellowstone Park Ranger, when he described the screams that they'd heard, he was on horseback talking to a hunting guide, and basically he described it as this sound came out of a valley, sounded like 1,000 elk going to their death. He said there's no animal there that he knew of that could have gotten that volume or the length of the scream, that amount of power that he was aware of. And all the trail crews in Yellowstone National Park find footprints and see things. And when they had the big fires in Yellowstone, I don't know how many years ago, he said for about 5 or 6 years, they weren't reported. But they came back, and they see them in Yellowstone from time to time. I told Jeff, I said, Bob told me, he said the place is Table Mountain, Table. He said that's the area. So for vacation in Yellowstone National Park, go camping there.
Nice. Now you mentioned, you talking about how law enforcement, some law enforcement have seen things. Are you? I'm sure you're familiar with the Beast of Whitehall that was featured on Monster Quest.
I think so. That one Bender and Engel was in.
I can't remember if he was in it or not. He may have been. Yeah, the Whitehall, New York. The police officer who actually had the sighting in 1976. His name is Paul Gosselin. He was the police officer back then. I was recently contacted by his wife, and she, which I was kind of like, whoa, okay, her name's Sue Gosselin, and she gave me a rundown. She messaged me through my event page for the conference that we're having this year here, and she checked it over and she was telling me how impressed she was the way everything's looking, and she explained to me who she was. I mean, she introduced herself, said, "Hey, Mom, my husband was the police officer that was featured on Monster Quest, who had a sighting back in 1976. It's known as the Beast of Whitehall." And she mentioned that they have a book coming out. They have a new book coming out. It's based off their true story and everything. And it's all on a true story, actually. Excuse me. And she had actually asked if they could attend our event, and I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." I mean, I'm already booked. Yeah, I mean, I'm booked on speakers, but I told her, I said, I told her, I said, "I'll tell you what, I will fit you in there. I'll get you in there. You guys go have a table, and in the early, I said I could get, if Paul wants to come up and say a few words, I'll be glad to throw him in there in the early part on day one, because we have a 2-day conference. So I said I'll definitely fit him in there. I said that would be great to have him there, and the band that was featured on the Monster Quest, and it's, to me, it's a famous New York, documentary and sighting, so the Beast of Whitehall. So yeah, we got Paul Gosselin, the police officer, and his wife. They'll be coming down to sell their books and speak a few words on everything, which I thought would be pretty cool. So, but
I filmed Monster Quest. It never aired because I made fun of him the whole time.
Oh man!
I said, "How in the hell are you guys talking Bigfoot with a catering crew, a light guy, a sound guy, this big crew? It ain't gonna happen." She told me, I was so bad. She said they came because they were here at my house, a crew from Minnesota, and they come down and they did a couple. I did turn them on to a couple of good witnesses, and they filmed them. But they said, "What do you think of our chances of going out and filming a Bigfoot?" I said, "About 1 in a million." I said, "But if I thought that you would, and I was going to take you there and thought that you might have a chance to get a film of a Bigfoot," I said, "I'd already have an arrangement made with you." She said, "Well, what was that?" I said, "You would owe me $1 million, because that's probably what that film would be worth if it was worth a hoot." And they just got mad, and they didn't run none of the footage we shot because I made fun of him. I told him it was dumb. It's about like finding Bigfoot. I had ideas for Bigfoot shows 30 years ago, and then all of a sudden now it's become like, I don't know, it's become a phenomenon, which I think is great. I think young people, if they want to go look for Bigfoot, whatever it takes that gets them in the woods and out in front of a computer, I'm all for.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, go look for Bigfoot, brother.
Absolutely.
I said, anything to get you in contact with Mother Nature. I said, but
Absolutely.
If you see one, you're not going to be thinking about it. You're going to be entranced on something else. And this is going to become completely by accident if it ever happens. But, go for it. What the heck?
Well, tell you what, Larry, I have more questions, but I'm going to let we have Zach Starrick in here, and I'm sorry, Zach. I put the poor guy on hold, but I know he's got a few things he wants to get out there, and probably throw in there to be part of this. So, Zach, you're now live with us. So, if you have any questions or anything you want to ask Larry, go ahead, Zach.
Well, first off, Mr. Battson, it's very nice to finally meet you. And not only that, Larry, you're not even 200 miles away from what my base of operations is with my team in Southern Illinois. I'm from around Carbondale, Illinois, if you know where that's at.
Yeah.
And you could tell, and you probably will agree with me that in you and my part, between you and me, where you're from in Indiana and where I'm at here in Illinois, that it would be perfect habitat for Bigfoot to hide out because there's a Shawnee National Forest between you and me. There's the Garden of the Gods and a whole bunch of things, and especially right here in Southern Illinois where the rivers intersect, where Ohio River and Mississippi River meet. It's prime travel corridor.
Well, I've hunted snakes in those areas. Timber rattlers and copperhead.
Yeah, we got timber rattlers, copperheads, cottonmouths.
I know, it's a wild area. I've collected reptiles in that area before. So.
Hey Zach, real quick, are you sitting out in your truck, Zach?
Yeah.
I hear a lot of wind in your microphone.
Well, that's because I'm breathing in it to it. I've got it on speakerphone where I can sit here and listen and relax.
Oh, okay. You don't have to speak so close to it then. That's why I use a headset. I'm hands free.
Well, it's kind of hard whenever people steal your headsets.
Well, it's no different if I was going to sit out in my minivan. I have a phone mount that's mounted to my windshield, so that's when I do my Facebook Lives when I'm driving. So but just a suggestion.
But getting back to what Larry was talking about, where people get drug out of their tents, and how a Sasquatch could be an aggressive creature, I wholeheartedly agree. And Larry, you being a researcher for wildlife, you can agree with me whenever I say this, and Daniel will tell you I've said this plenty of times, that any kind of creature, whether it be human or animal, if you back them into a corner or you get between them and their young, you're going to have a fight on your hands.
Oh, yeah, I've got a possum we've rescued. It'll kick your ass in a minute.
Well, I mean, I've seen that. I'm a cattle farmer, and I'm a cattle farmer here in Southern Illinois, and I have 40 head of Black Angus, Limousin, and Charolais, and Hereford cattle.
There you go.
And I know that firsthand. You get between a mother cow and her calf, and she'll mow you down and make a dirt mop out of you.
Yeah, you get broken ribs at least out of the deal.
Oh, I did. I got spun around by a cow about 2 or 3 weeks ago whenever we had one that had twins, and we was trying to get her and her other calf up to the corral where we had the other one that she abandoned, and I got between her and that calf, and she spun me around a tree.
Oh, there's more people been hurt by cattle and horses and all the wild animals combined. It's like either one.
But like, I got a question for you. There's so much speculation out there in the world whenever it comes to Bigfoot. Where do you stand? Do you think it's human, a relic hominid? Do you think it's undiscovered great ape? Where's your take on this?
It's not an ape. It's not an ape. If it was an ape, we'd have one in a zoological facility by now. It's above that. What it is, we're still not sure. There's even the talk I've heard theories of Neanderthal, caveman. I don't know if that's, I think it's, and there's subspecies of them, because, you get into Canada, Northern California, you hear more reports of the larger species, and then you get down to Florida, the skunk apes, where they're much smaller. And a lot of that runs, I'll tell you, the parallel is the mountain lions. You get into Florida, you got the Florida panther. It's a much smaller cat, 90 to 120 pounds. You get up in the western part of the country, you get the mountain lions that go close to 200 pounds. And one theory that I've always had about these, I get off the subject, so you have to excuse me, is that these things will track a mountain lion and wait for the mountain lion to make a kill, and then they'll move the mountain lion off the kill and take it. I honestly believe that's true. I just think there's so much, and for a Sasquatch, mountain lion would be easy to track because they're so vocal, and when they make their kill, they're so vocal that So I see their parallels, and they're so highly intelligent. You know, they have not only their vocalizations with screams and gibberish and whatnot, but they actually have they can mimic the human voice. I've got a friend who has a cabin up in northern Washington, right on the Canadian border, and he was down at his neighbor's house, and they got this big Rottweiler. Well, his neighbor was aware of them as well. They've been around his cabin too. They just live a couple miles apart. And one night they were standing on the porch, and they could hear him in the forest. They could hear something moving through the forest. So the Rottweiler gets down barely off of the porch and just lets out this little growl. So they realize it's what's there. So they're standing there, and they're watching this dog with this little growl. All of a sudden, out of the forest comes this vocalization. The dog's name was Mowgli. And they said it was as clear as can be. They heard this thing going, Mowgli, Mowgli. And, they thought, well, basically it's trying to call the dog, because there's a history of them hating dogs. They've taken German Shepherds and Bloodhounds and killed them by twisting them like a wet washer egg. And so he said after they'd heard that, they said that just screwed everything all up. They said now we're for sure we don't know what we're dealing with. And they just went into the cabin and turned off all the lights for the night.
Yeah, you were talking about how they dislike dogs greatly. I have a show on YouTube called Backwoods Investigations, and I invite on and I interview guests that's researchers in the topic of Bigfoot, Dogman, other types of cryptids. And the one guy I had on, it was sometime late last year in December, named Rich Daniels out in New Mexico, and he was talking about whenever he goes and he wants to make sure that they stay out of his camp, he'll go to the local groomer and get a trash bag of dog hair, and he'll sit it out and just let the scent of that dog hair go out, and it keeps him out of his camp. And back in 2016, I had my cousin Kyle with me, and we did our first annual Bigfoot camp out on my farm, and we had a neighbor's dog come with us. She's a blue tick, and I agree that they don't really care for dogs, and that they feel like it's territorial encroachment whenever they're close to a dog or a dog's close to them. Him and me had the dog out with us on a night hunt, and the dog would get away from us. She'd go maybe about 10, 20 yards, bell her, and come back, and she would be trailing something, and we followed her all night. But then we sat down to take about 5 minutes. We sat down on a stump, and we shut all our lights off, and she got away from us, and then she started doing that bell or that brrr, and she got, and then I said, "Come here, Sally, come here, girl," and I started snapping my fingers and whistling, and then all of a sudden we heard like a, and it sounded like something had hit her. It sounded like someone slapped an open hand across her face, and she let out a yelp, and she come running back, and she had a bit of a limp to her. She got underneath me and my cousin Kyle's legs and hid, and she wouldn't come out. And then that's when stuff started happening around us. She would not leave camp unless one of us went with her, and she would sleep right next to the fire ring.
Yeah, dogs won't track them. That's been tried. They will not. And I've heard of bloodhounds being drowned in 6 inches of water. That was down Arkansas or something, basically. And a bloodhound's a big damn dog. I mean, that's a big, they're pretty tough. And
they're vicious, too, when they're provoked.
Oh, yeah. So for one to be drowned in 6 inches of water, you know it's had to be something pretty powerful to do that. But, yeah they don't like dogs because they're they have a big pain in the ass.
There was another report. It's actually happened about an hour and a half east of me in Louisa County here in Virginia. And I was notified about it by this girl I went to school with. It was her uncle's property. And the thing is, she sent me pictures. She sent me some, there was foot tracks that they found going across the property. And what happened was before her uncle found these foot tracks, what led to him looking around was he went to go check on his dogs, feed his dogs or something. Now keep in mind his dogs were on chains, and the chains were, they were in spikes that went into the ground. Both of his dogs were gone, and the chains were gone. The spikes were gone.
Yeah.
Everything was gone. And I wanted to investigate that so bad, but she contacted me back. She said, when the police came to investigate, somehow Billy Willard got a hold of that report. So once he got into it and got started with it, I said, no, I left it alone. I didn't want to interfere. So Billy Willard did a big report and actually posted several tracks and photos relating to that situation. And the funny thing is, not only did I know the girl who, I went to school with her, and I actually used to work for her uncle. I did masonry work, and so I would have loved to get up there if I had the first shot at it, but that was interesting. That like I said, the dogs are missing. I mean, the only evidence they have is the humanoid-looking foot tracks, on the property going across the field.
Well, that's pretty good evidence. I mean,
yeah.
They don't. I've heard. I had an incident where a guy just got back from Vietnam, went on a fishing trip with his nephew up in northern Indiana, and he took along his dog. A similar incident. They were sleeping in a tent one night and heard something rumbling around their camp, and the dog bolted out and heard that thump where he'd been hit, run back in the tent, wouldn't go back out. Well, this is a tack-trained German Shepherd. And it was completely buffaloed by whatever it was. Well, they saw it. I mean, they got a pretty damn good look at it. So they knew what did it to the dog. So
absolutely.
There's another thing that you brought up about it being the Sasquatch being relic hominid. This is a theory that me and my neighbor, who's got a PhD in psychology. He used to be a psychologist and a medical doctor, and he's from India. And Daniel, you've heard me talk about this a couple times, the Homo heidelbergensis origin theory. Well, what him and me believe is that this is just a theory, that scientists believe that Homo sapiens, Homo neanderthalensis all stem from Homo heidelbergensis. But the Neanderthals went to Europe, the Homo sapiens went to Africa. What about in Asia, if we coined the term Homo megapodensis for Bigfoot in Latin? What if that's where Homo megapodensis or Bigfoot went to? Because some of the farthest back reports that have been reported throughout history started in Asia.
Well, it's just speculation. I mean, I speculate a lot too. We can't identify this thing till we have a part of one. I mean, even John Green said if one ever's killed in the field, you don't have to bring the whole body out. Just bring a part of it. The head, the hand. Of course, I'm not interested in killing one because I'm once they're proven they exist, I think all hell will break loose.
Yeah.
That's what happened to the gorilla. The gorilla was completely undiscovered.
Do you think they should be?
No, I don't. I don't think they should be killed.
No.
As far as I'm concerned, it could be a legend forever. I don't. What's the advantage of identifying the species? It'll just give. Basically, what it would do is all the people that have seen him would just say, "Oh, I guess I was right." Well, if I saw one and got a damn good look at it, I know I was right. So, I haven't. So that's but no, I don't think we should kill one. I'm like my wife's the same theory. She leave them alone. You know, we've lost a lot of species we've discovered and killed, but I'm not thinking that a bunch of hunters could go in and track one down, because they've tried that already, but not too much success.
You know,
done more
one
ones
of the
than
other
done a couple stupid.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna ask, you know, or throw out there. I know one of the biggest things, you know, a lot of people ask, is Bigfoot aggressive, or you know, or are they, you know, and I know there's reports of them being aggressive, you know, and then both being curious, and you know, I've heard a few aggressive
I've been on the brunt of the aggression before, twice.
But
damn sure,
yeah,
I know for certain they are.
Yeah, and I know you had a story you shared that you learned about, that you were called about over in Ohio. I recall you talking about that story. That was pretty interesting. Yeah. Is that homeowner still there? The one who kept having
yeah, he's still there. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Is he still receiving? Do you know if he's still receiving activity over there?
Well, they do. It's filled up a lot since he's moved there. When he was there, he was about the only one that lived in that area. They built a home in the middle of nowhere. He's an outdoorsman. That's what he wanted, he thought. But and now the people build homes in that area, and that stuff happens to him. He received so much harassment after he went to papers and TV and let people know what was being seen. And he now, people try to talk to him about it. He won't. He just laughs at him. He just looks. He says, "Oh, good luck with that." He says he'll sit on his porch. He says he'll sit on his porch. He said he had one neighbor. He called him Nature Boy, to build a home, want to keep all the trees and everything up wild around it. And he said he sat on his porch one night, could hear the screams coming down by Nature Boy's house, and all the lights come on. Before he knew it, he was cutting down trees and mowing his grass and making things a little more civilized, I guess.
Wow.
So he just laughs about it now. But I'll tell you what, when I was first contacted by him, and he told me some of the stuff that had happened, I had to go up and talk to him in person. And he basically had a journal put together that when I looked at this journal, and he had dates and everything that had happened, complete analysis of the stories, pictures of footprints he found around his house and so forth, and articles in the paper from the area. And I told him, I said, man, this is amazing. I said, I wish I could have a chance to read this all. And his wife just flat told me, she said, if you give me a couple weeks, I'll type it all out and send it to you. And she did. And I'll tell you what, it's a book in itself. I consider him one of the top authorities in the whole country on this subject. And I've tried to talk to a person. I told him, I said, I'm going to be up. I did the Chautauqua Lake Bigfoot conference years ago. I said, that's not far from you. I said, you ought to come over. No, not interested. Not interested at all. In fact, I had a film crew going to go up to that area and do a film, and his house was going to be home base. And the night before we were to go, he calls me and says, I'm pulling out. Not interested in having all that up here. No way. No, don't want to do it. So
yeah, that's interesting, because I'm obviously within an hour from there. I'm between the expo and Conneaut. That's where I reside.
Oh, really? Yeah. It's not as wild as it once was, but I'll tell you what, he had so much stuff happen to him, and he had seen it several times. In fact, when you talked about the thing rocking back and forth, he observed that one night. He was on his back patio, and he had one security light, and it was late, and that security light, and he could see something in the darkness. He couldn't make anything out. You kind of, when you look in the darkness and the things are moving, you can't tell what the hell it is. And all of a sudden, it walked underneath the light, and that light cascaded over its head and shoulders, and he watched it. It just stood there and rocked back and forth looking at him, breathing real low. Then after about 2 or 3 minutes, it just took a step back and into the forest, and you couldn't see anymore, and it took off. And his guesstimate on that one was about 8 foot tall, I believe. But he said
that's awesome.
Nothing told him that he was this thing. Another thing I need to explain: they're not afraid of us at all. And I totally believe that if they think you're going to do anything that affects their freedom or their lives, they'll kill you.
Yeah.
That's just back to life. They are aggressive. And he told me there was, well, the 2 incidents. He had a big one in there that he was totally afraid of. He wouldn't go back out without any firearm. And a report I was out of Morgan Monroe State Forest in southern Indiana of one that was leaving a guy with a 21-inch footprint. A huge monster thing. And the guy that lived in that house that had all of his dealings with him several times. He said when that thing was around, he said the smaller ones he'd never heard or saw. He said this thing was something else. He said it was a whole different deal. Whole different.
So what do you believe their take is when they're, because a lot of them, they like to stay hidden. They don't like to reveal themselves, although people do have sightings. I mean, do you believe they just don't want to be bothered pretty much on the most part?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's no different than the gorillas up in the mountain gorillas up in Africa. The people that take you back to see the mountain gorillas, they're not easy to find. They don't want to be bothered. Same thing with any of the apes. They don't want to be, not unless they're, like macaques, and figured out that people feed them, and for the tourist industry in India and other parts of Indonesia where they come and take food. But most of your primates don't want to be bothered by us.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them. But especially your great apes, your gorillas, your chimps, your bonobos, gibbons. They don't,
So, as far as speculation, not to put you on the spot, what do you believe they are?
Well, we don't know. I'd just be talking. I think it's a species in its own. I think it's like I've said, it's not an ape. We would, like I said, we would have had one already. It's not an ape. And they have too many human-like features. Some of the faces are described ape-like. Sometimes the faces are described human-like. So it's they're like us. They all look different. Because they're that sophisticated of an animal. They all have different facial features. So if you get somebody comes up with a picture, they think, well, this is what they look like. No, it's not what they look like. No. They all look different. They all have different faces, different builds.
Yeah, I agree with it.
Some are massive. Some are. I've heard of reports of these spindly ones that they said weren't really that heavy at all, and weren't that big. And so they're all different. They're like us. So they're closer to us. Probably more than apes. The hair development's just for survival.
Yeah.
I mean, they live in some pretty
rough terrain.
We've had
hard.
terrain and weather. We've had 25 below zero wind chill here in Indiana here lately. So.
I know the pain, brother.
Well, just think about this. What a tough son of a bitch they must be to be out 24/7.
Oh yeah,
think about
that's
that.
Truth.
I mean,
ungodly fat layer. You got to imagine how thick the hair is on those things that makes them look so massive for them to be able to stay warm in sub-zero temperatures.
Well, and the reports of how quickly they move. Big animal like that be able to move with that dexterity and that quickness. And a lot of times when people have seen how athletic they are, they think, oh, my God. Well, my friend in Ohio, he said he realized when he watched one run one time that if he was in the woods and they wanted to take him out, they could do it. No problem. No question at all. They'd be on him. He'd be dead before he even realized what had happened.
Here's a question that just popped in my head. If they could kill us at a moment's notice, if they wanted to, and we would be completely in their power, how come there hasn't been no reported kill? Most people would be seeing them in a group. A group of people would see a massive Sasquatch, and that thing would go and have the chance to take one or all of them out. I mean, I'm pretty sure that a Sasquatch could kill a group of 5 to 10 people, no problem, with just a single blow to each person. Do you think it would be intimidation by strength in numbers kind of factor, or What's your take on that?
Well, I don't think that would happen. They're like all animals. They don't kill them unless it's absolutely necessary. And like I had told the report that I'd gotten out of that Indian reservation where those 3 young Native Americans were killed running salmon lines, Apparently they were up to something else that got them into trouble. That caused one to be dismembered, one to be buried underneath piles of rock, and one just literally be beaten up against trees. So they must have had a damn good reason for it.
It does seem they're more territorial.
Yeah. The woods is full of bears. Bears could not take us out anytime they wanted to.
Yeah.
We're no competition for a bear one-on-one. Are you kidding me? We're nothing. It's like when I raise baby bears, I don't ever play with them because I don't want them to know how strong I am. It's all intimidation,
Right.
Once you snap your finger at them and get them to back off, because if they figure out how strong you are, you're done. It's over, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point.
It's okay. Here's the analogy I'll put to you. Almost, you're raised by your dad. Would you ever think? No, of course it's happened before, but would you ever think I'm gonna just kick Dad's butt tonight? No, because he raised you and he totally he has you intimidated. You don't do that. Of course, there are exceptions. But
yeah, absolutely.
Ask those
Larry,
brothers in California.
We have time for one more question, and I wanted to throw this one question out. A lot of people believe that they're habituating, and they're leaving. I believe leaving objects and gifts are out there. To me, are fine to try to experiment to see interaction. And people like to leave food out there, which I don't think that's quite a good idea. And the other thing is, when things are moved or changed around or taken, people believe or they're assuming that Sasquatch is interacting with them. I have something I'm experimenting with, a rock stack and a feather. When I've checked on it every so often, I believe there has been interaction, and the thing is, my take is, if there is real interaction, we don't know if it's an animal or another person or, whatever, but what's your take on habituating? And, I think people misinterpret what habituating really is, but as far as interacting, leaving gifting, having a gifting site, which a lot of them refer to it as, what's your take on that?
As I mentioned earlier, they're not predictable. So to put food out in an area thinking they're going to come on a regular basis and take that food, I don't buy it. And not unless you're there to witness it, to see what's happened. That rock pile's been moved, that food's been taken out of a tree. It means nothing. I mean, it's fun to speculate, If kids want to do it and think they're looking for Bigfoot, hey, go for it, brother. Get you in the woods, whatever it takes to get you. But I think that's too much speculation. You know, and it's supposed to make. I absolutely do not have any. I don't find any substance to anyone that's go in the forest and basically say they see them every time or they have. No. They're too reclusive. They're too smart. They're too rare. I just don't buy it.
Yeah.
And not unless you've got video or picture of them doing something like I mentioned, taking food or. Set a camera by it. I'd say put a game camera by it, but that don't work because they can smell them. They found wolves can smell those damn game cameras, so they're absolutely worthless.
Yeah, they got our scent all over them. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like we said earlier, look what these things must be. They live in the woods 24/7. 24/7. They got to be bad hombres.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
they are. Yeah. And
I'm just under the impression that if you could build some type of trust with them, maybe you could get better interactions or game camera photos or whatever.
Well, here's the problem with that, though. They've dealt with too many humans that's pointed rifles at them. Of course, my main thing about guys that put a gun on one if I don't kill it in the first shot? That's what goes through their minds. So, because I guarantee you, you may shoot at that one, but there's 2 or 3 that you don't see that's going to take you out right then.
It's just like if you shoot and injure a bear, and he runs off, and he's only injured. Brother. Yeah, he's gonna come. He's gonna come circle back around and come get you.
Yeah, go ahead, follow that blood trail after you've wounded that bear.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, especially they can be a bear doesn't even have to be shot. They can charge you. Look what happened to Tom Moore about 2 years ago up in Montana, where he got mauled by that sow twice.
Yeah, I mean, and these things, these Sasquatches, I consider, take that bear temperament and multiply it by about 20. They absolutely have no patience, none, zero. If you walked in the woods, you may have been seen and not even realize you'd been seen and observed.
Oh, I believe that.
Oh, I know it's true.
Yeah.
You've been observed, and they just decide, wonder what he's up to. Well, they know what you're up to. They can tell by what you're involved to do. And they can watch you for a couple minutes and think, well, he's a hunter, so we're out of here. And how many reports have I taken? How many reports have I taken of people that have deer hunted and they've walked up on the deer and a Sasquatch come out of the woods and toss the deer over his shoulder and take off with it?
Yeah,
more
I've
than
heard
once.
Of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I got an email from a fellow that had some. He saw 2 young ones look at him, and then the older one showed up on the scene, grabbed the deer, acted aggressive toward him, like daring him to not take the deer, and then they took the deer and they all left. So it's interesting, 50 years of doing it, I've heard. But like John Green said, he said the longer you do it, the more questions you're going to have.
Yeah.
But what you got to do is you got to find parallels. If you hear a report, you got to think, how can I substantiate this report? How can I make it, take some credibility to this report at all? So you got to find the parallels. You got to find something that similar behavior, whether it's human, bear, whatever, gorilla.
Right.
But I find it quite funny when I'm doing a program, per se, in a library and giving a lecture, and a guy comes up to me and he says, I'd track one in a minute if I saw one. And I look at him and say, that's real easy to say in this library, well lit, in the middle of Columbus, Indiana, but if you're out in the woods in the darkness and you hear the barred owls and the coyotes, and you see one of these things, the last thing that's going to go through your mind is, I'm going to track that son of a bitch.
Absolutely.
Ain't going to happen. It ain't going to happen.
I'm just going to be excited enough that I was in the area.
Well, I'll tell you the truth. There's a lot of people that, because of their sighting, has completely ruined their outdoor experience. That whenever they go in the woods, they're always looking over their shoulder. And it's completely ruined it for him, completely. Well, like the fellow in Ohio, he won't go in the gun or go into the woods without a gun. I've never even carried a gun in my life, so I kind of think, man, you must be really intimidated. So,
awesome.
For what it's worth.
Well, I'll tell you what, Larry. Before we go off air here, I want to thank you for adding me on your Facebook group, Larry the Animal Guy and Friends. That's pretty cool.
Oh, yeah, I'll tell everybody about that, because we post lots of great stuff about animals on it and our work that we do through our schools. And I want to mention, too, I still have some DVDs left from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service program that we did, that they filmed. We did an hour-long presentation. It has stuff like the Patterson film on it and stuff, and they're available through Larry the Animal. If they message me, I can tell them how to get one.
Okay,
cool.
very awesome.
It's historical. I mean, it's absolutely it. Like John Green said, this is an historical moment for Bigfoot researchers.
Yes, that's good information. That's good to know. So yeah, I'll definitely give you your page a share as well. So, and Larry, I can't thank you enough for agreeing to come on here and do this with us. And it's been
my pleasure.
Great pleasure. Yeah, it's been a pleasure on my behalf and our behalf and the listeners. And and for the people in the live chat, I do apologize for not getting to the question. There was questions on the live chat that I did not get to address, but maybe perhaps for another. Yeah. One of the questions. Let me scroll back here because there's a bunch of stuff here. Well, it was from one individual back to back. The one question was, so where do dead Bigfoots go? And something about we have no skeletal evidence. So I guess that's what they were asking.
The woods are filled with animals. How many times when you walk through the woods do you find a dead one?
Right.
Mother Nature has a good way of getting rid of things.
Oh, yeah.
And I've had more than one report of one being shot and another one come in and carry it off. And I've heard that more than once. So, as far as skeletal remains, they do have remains up from northern Ohio, and Project Blue Book mentioned it, of a large human-like animal they found skeletons of. And that's documented. A whole area filled with that stuff. So, and you know, a bear skeleton looks very similar to human.
Yes.
If you take off the head and the paws, the feet, it looks very human-like. In fact, more than once, that's been identified as human remains where it turned out it was a bear. So, you know, I don't think they leave them around. I think Mother Nature takes them fairly quickly, and I think there's probably people that have found them and not realize what they're looking at.
Yeah, so as Zach, keep that in mind. You can share that with Facebook user John Wayne. Everything that he shares on his page that I know that identify as bear, he's calling it Bigfoot related. So you can pass that along.
Kind of hard. He's got me blocked.
And
it wasn't me that made him block me. It was my buddy Luke White, who's a complete non-believer. But he told him, he says, if I see a Bigfoot, I'll be sure to put a 45 right between his eyes, and I'll drop him off at your front door, and I'll kiss your ass.
Tell him that'll never happen. He'll have that 45 as an enema quicker than they'll shoot one between the eyes.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, no, that's interesting though. But you know, that's the thing. A lot of people got to understand. That's one thing I tell people. You got to get familiar with your known wildlife. You know, I believe it's important to understand and know your wildlife before you try to go look for something or research something that's considered unclassified or unknown. You know.
Yeah.
That way, you know, we can better compare and analyze, and, separate. But yeah, that's good stuff. But so absolutely.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Oh, absolutely.
Appreciate it, Larry.
And again, anybody listening or future listeners, if you're on Facebook, look up Larry, the Animal Guy, and Friends Facebook group page. And any other information, you could Google his name too. So yeah,
just Google Larry Battson with 2 T's, and there's a bunch of stuff.
Oh yeah.
Hey Larry, I got a question for you.
Okay.
You aren't no kin to Jerry and Rhonda Battson, are you?
No. There's 2 T's or 1 T?
1.
Yeah,
No.
Mine's 2.
Yeah,
okay, because I was going to say, because I got a bunch of Battsons that live around here.
God, I'm so sorry. I really like to apologize for that. But
well, Larry, thank you again, because the episode is going to be ended very shortly. So, well, you guys have a good night. Zach, you can stay put for just a couple of minutes. And Larry, I will be in the near future. I do want to talk to you about a couple of things in the near future here. So
okay.
At some point I'll be messaging you. So.
Sounds like a plan.
And Larry, if you're ever in my area, look me up. I'll be glad to go out with you.
Oh, okay. Well, it's hard for me to get away. I got 5 tigers to take care of with my wife. And when I tell my wife I'm going to go on a Bigfoot expedition and leave her with all this responsibility, she doesn't look too kindly of it. Especially if I could walk out my back door and walk into one. So. You know,
well, if I'm ever out your way, I definitely would love to have a tour of the place, if you don't mind. I love animals.
Well, in the summer, when not so much snow and mud like there's going to be here shortly. We're going to get rain tomorrow, I guess, so it's going to be a mud hole. So.
Oh yeah, they're calling for rain early in the morning here.
Yeah, so it's get rid of all this darn snow and this sub-zero weather. I think we're through the sub-zero weather. Usually February doesn't offer that so much, so I hope I'm right. God, I hope I'm right.
Don't jinx us, Larry. I'm ahead of you on this weather, buddy.
I may have put it out there, and that may be a problem. But anyway, well, it's nice talking to you guys. It's a pleasure.
All right, thank you very much. You have a good night, sir.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, bye-bye. All right, that concludes our guest for the evening, Mr. Larry Battson, Larry the Animal Guy. Everybody, well, thank you for listening to Squash Show Radio. Now we're going to jump into our after show for the evening. Just some brief discussions. So if there's anybody still out there listening, perhaps feel free to call in the call-in number if you want to jump in on this live conversation. The area code is 602-753-1963. That is 602-753-1963. Well, Zach, it's just right now. It's just me and you. Oh man, I'll tell you what. I really enjoyed that. That was a lot of information there. So,
I was surprised about this and everything, and hearing him just talking everything. A very knowledgeable man, especially about wildlife. And I mean, I didn't even know who Larry Battson was until you brought it up, and then he's talking about Johnny Carson, and I remember seeing him on shows like that and. Doing spots on talk shows and the like, and I mean, I knew I'd heard of him before. I just couldn't place the face.
Right. Yeah, Larry. He's pretty well known. He's been around the world, all across the country, and I've actually one of the images I saw of him was Betty White from the Golden Girls, well, many years ago, where they were standing together and. He had a python around his neck, standing right next to Betty White from the Golden Girls.
Oh, God, I would not be nowhere near that man. I hate snakes.
Yeah, well, when he does a presentation, he brings so much of his animals to the presentation and introduces them. He gives a little bit of knowledge about each one, which I find very, very interesting, very impressive. And in one of the presentations I've seen that he's done, was actually done here in Virginia. He actually called up somebody from the audience and ended up, bringing up a young boy. I think the boy was probably about 11, 12, maybe 13. And before he even introduced what he was going to bring out, he was directing and instructing the young boy to hold his arms out. And to hold his arms out and stay
That's
like
usually
that.
A bad sign when they say, stick your arm out there for a second, son.
Well, it's funny because I wasn't sure, but I had an idea what was going on. And sure enough, he walks out to the side and he comes back with this, probably 8 foot long, 8 foot long python or so. And
God, give me willies.
And he takes the python.
I'm like Wendy Bagwell. If there ain't a back door, I'll make one.
Yeah, I was just wondering what was going through that little boy's mind. I was like, no, because I don't like snakes, but I've been close to them, both poisonous and non-venomous ones, and I don't, even a non-venomous snake, I mean, I've walked out of the woods, and I'm standing at the edge of the tree line, and I'm standing in grass, and I'm just standing there looking out, and something catches my attention. I just so happen to look down on my foot, and here's this big black snake curled up, just looking out in the same direction I'm looking at, and I'm like, what the? And I'm like lightning headed back to my van. Yeah.
Here's a little thing, and Larry can tell you this too that I learned. You know how to tell the difference between a venomous and a non-venomous snake?
Their eyes.
Yep, the eyes, the shape of the head. If it's a blunt nose snake, non-venomous if it's pointed, with the pattern of the underbelly on the tail.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay.
And not only that, you know how you can tell the difference between a venomous snake and a non-venomous snake when they're in the water?
Well, how's that? That I'm not sure about.
Non-venomous snakes swim submerged. The venomous snakes will inflate their lungs with air so they float.
Ah, okay.
My granddad taught me that.
So pretty much about 99% of the snakes I've seen in the water were just water snakes. So yeah.
Yeah, because water snakes feed on fish and minnows and bugs. They're going to be down in the water, and they'll hold their breath, and they'll go underneath the water.
Right. That's pretty good. That's actually something that's good to keep in mind. Because, when I used to live where I grew up on the other side of Virginia, we lived in a private lake community. And, I was always out in the water fishing and everything. And sometimes when you come into some of the coves and stuff where the water gets shallow, you come across a lot of snakes. You can see there's water snakes all over the place. And, some of them, I was probably a teenager, and I was in a canoe. I was in a canoe with a buddy of mine. We come into this shallow cove, and he spotted it, not me. And there was a snake. It was a water snake. It was just underneath the water. We're in 2 feet of water right now. Here we are in 2 feet of water, and here's a snake right on the side of me. Because he looks back towards me, looks in the water, sees a snake. The tail end of it's touching the bottom, touching the ground, and the head is just barely touching the surface of the water. And of course, water snakes, if you're not familiar with them, some of them look like copperheads.
Oh yeah.
So we freaked out. The first thing we did was took the paddle, swatted away, and got out of Dodge. Get to the deeper water, hurry up.
I got a friend of mine that lives in Shelbyville, Indiana. Her mom owns an 8-foot-long Burmese python for a pet. And she posted a picture of her mom on Facebook about a couple weeks ago, and she was snuggling with that snake on the couch.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I looked at her, I said, what the heck is wrong with you?
Oh, man. Lord have mercy.
Like you heard Wendy Bagwell yakking. Look around, find where the back door is. If there ain't one, I'll make it.
Right.
But here's the thing. The reason I'm so scared of snakes, you can blame it on my granddad. My grandpa will pick them up by the tail. He'll sling them around in a circle in the air and throw them at you, dead or alive.
Yeah, I mean,
I remember one time there was a black king snake that was out here, and it was crawling around by the four-wheeler, and this was back when I was about maybe 10, 12 years old. He pulled that thing out of the engine block of that four-wheeler and threw it in a circle and around his head in a circle, and he looked right at me, and he chucked that snake right at me, and it wrapped around my neck and took off.
My.
And then he kept picking on me, saying, "Was that running down your leg?"
Yeah, people could call me a wuss or whatever, but yeah, I'm sorry, but I don't like snakes. So, Man, well, you guys were talking about rain out your way come tomorrow. I haven't checked the weather for tomorrow, but last I heard it was supposed to be nice weather. When I walked out of work early today, the temperature I couldn't believe. I was like, "Wow, this is nice." I was like, it felt like a good 50 degrees or so, and that's what I felt like. I didn't check the temperature, but it was actually very comfortable. But tomorrow we're expecting nice weather, so I'm going to double check that because I am supposed to go out in the woods for a little while tomorrow. There is an area I'm going to go into and check out, and I haven't been into in a while. I'll probably run into Fred and Connie because they're supposed to be out there, but they're going to be up on the ridge. They'll probably be out where I'm heading in. They're going to be somewhere off to the right somewhere, but I still may end up running into them. Depends on which way they come in, travel into. So I'll wait and see how that goes. But well, I'll tell you what, Zach. I'm going to go ahead and call it a night. And there's a few things I need to check on anyway before I, call it a night altogether myself. But again, tonight went great. I want to, definitely thank you and Ryan for interacting and sharing information and asking questions. That went really well tonight. And so for now on, when we do have a guest, that's all I want to do is just keep it to a minimum. It's easier that way. And then of course when we do our next Squash Dome roundtable, we could have everybody on. So. But meanwhile, Zach, I'm going to go ahead and end this
something that you might like.
Yeah, I just seen it pop up, so I'll check that out as soon as I get off here. So, but meanwhile, like I said, I'm going to drop off here, and anyone that's listening, don't forget about the 2018 ECBRO First Annual Virginia Bigfoot Conference, June 30th and July 1st, in Fishersville, Virginia, at the Augusta Expo. Definitely check that out. You can find all our information on our event page right on Facebook. Tell your friends and family about it. Share the event page. Let everybody know. Help spread the word. Also, you could if you're a YouTuber, go check out my YouTube channel, ECBRO98. You can find me on Twitter at ECBRO98, and also under my name, Daniel Benoit. And Zach, how about before we jump off here, you want to go ahead and plug in anything on your end?
Yeah, just check us out on Facebook, Southern Illinois Monster Hunters Team homepage on Facebook. You can type in us in on Google, and it'll pop up all our information, our website. Be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, SIMA's Team Southern Illinois Monster Hunters on YouTube. You can watch some of our field videos that we've put up, updates from me updating it. I do update videos every couple months. Not only that, check out the latest episodes from Backwoods Investigations. We're not done yet.
Awesome. Very awesome. I know I am. I know several others are. We're looking forward to your next episodes, your next live feeds with your shows that you do. So they're always exciting. I love interacting with them. So like I said, it's a lot of fun too. So, for the record, when you had what's the other? Who was it? Sam. When you had Sam on there, the audio was actually pretty good on that one there.
I went and I moved the phone around because I used to have the phone sitting down on a little box with the mic turned up, but I figured it out that the mic on my tablet, the voice receptor, was on the top of my tablet, so I have it. You've seen the picture of my studio. I have the tablet propped up against the desktop and the hard drive, so I just put my phone up on top of the hard drive right above the speaker for the tablet and right where my microphone is for my laptop.
Okay. So, and by doing that, you can still see the interaction on the live chat pretty well?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Very cool. Well, hey, that's working, so stay at it. Yeah, that's pretty good. But
ain't no fancy setup, but it may look pretty complex, but it works when you get the hang of it.
Oh yeah, most definitely. All right. Well, Zach, I'll see you on Facebook. tomorrow, if everything works out, I will be on the field. And where I'll be at, if phone reception works out, I'll be doing Facebook Live out there. So yeah, you could be on the lookout for that. It'll probably be close to 11 noon time. I mean, I'll be out there before then, but I probably won't go Facebook Live till I get far enough in the woods. Again, if the reception is good too. So, so
Right.
But so meanwhile, Zach, you have a good night. I'm gonna drop off here, and until next time, Zach. Just watch your own radio.
Good night, everybody.
Your host, Daniel Benoit. Let's watch your own radio. I hope you guys enjoyed tonight's episode.
Get to Old Navy for the deal you've been waiting for all year. Flip-flops for just $1. That's right, flip-flops for the whole family for just $1. This Saturday only at Old Navy. Valid 6/23, limit 10, select styles, in-store only.
Hi, it's Jamie, Progressive #1, #2 employee. Leave a message at the... Hey, Jamie, it's me, Jamie. This is your daily pep talk. I know it's been rough going ever since people found out about your a cappella group, Mad Harmony, but you will bounce back. I mean, you're the guy always helping people find coverage options with the Name Your Price tool. It should be you giving me the pep talk. Now get out there, hit that high note, and take Mad Harmony all the way to nationals this year! Sorry, it's pitchy.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.